on page two. I don't know. I don't know what page you're on. I'm on 289, but you guys are a few pages before me. So like 287, 287. Top of the page where it says defining the age of youth. Defining the age of youth. 387. Yes. Sorry. Defining the age of youth. And if you are new to our study, this is the ABCs of Christian maturity. It's a little bit more advanced study. We have been in this for almost 5 years, and we are almost done with it. We're on letter Y, and there's not a whole lot. Well, you'll probably be in letter Y for maybe about a month or so more, maybe a little bit more than that. Then we'll go to letter Z, and we'll be done. We'll go back to the landmarks of Baptist doctrine for a while. So anyhow, we are on page 387 and looking at defining the age of youth. I'll do a real quick recap. We gave an introduction at the beginning there. We talked about the ages and stages of life. When we talked about that, we mainly actually focused in on like old age as opposed to the rest, because it's important to realize that someday we're going to get older and you can't do what you used to do when you were younger. And so like Carl keeps saying, I'm not as young as I used to be, because he thinks I'm like 13 years older or something. But every time I turn around, he's saying, you're 50, right? And no, I'm not 50, not yet. I got a couple days till then. So then we talked about the age of childhood last week. And so this week we're looking at defining the age of youth. So understanding that youth is older than childhood. So we're going to look here. The time between puberty and adulthood is referred to as adolescence. Today's society generally views the adolescent as a part child, part adult entity, still to be fully disciplined and equipped. This thinking has helped produce a generation of, quote, big kids, many of whom do not stop beyond the teen years, dependent, unreliable, and irresponsible. I will tell you that I have heard of big kids being as old as 40, 50 years old. Unreliable, irresponsible, and dependent upon others to survive. Youth is indeed the time of transition into adulthood. The Bible speaks of the days of Israel's youth as the time she became a nation, the point in her history, or in their history, when, as Hosea says, they came up out of the land of Egypt. Hosea chapter 2 and verse number 15. And you guys are all muted over there, but you can unmute if you have an answer to give. But if there's a bunch of background noise, I'll mute you back until you unmute yourself for giving an answer. So, but you can mute and unmute yourself if you figure out how to do that. So, Hosea chapter 2 verse number 15 says, I will give her vineyard. It's like on the edge of that. And I will give her from thence, and the valley of Achor for a door of hope, and she shall sing there as in the days of her youth, and as in the day when she came up out of the land of Egypt. So this is speaking of Israel. This is a nation, and it speaks of the nation having days of its youth. If you thought about America and the days of the youth of America, you would think of the time frame shortly after the Bill of Rights was signed. The early 1800s. In fact, you would think of America in her infancy, really, for the first 50 years or so. It wouldn't be until close to actually the Civil War or after the Civil War. Actually, the Civil War was kind of like the days of like preteen, where preteen or very early teenage years as far as like a person is concerned. What happens during those years usually? Bickering and fighting and rebellion and all kinds of stupid stuff going on, right? And so that was pretty much what happened during the Civil War. Somebody had a brain and they said, you can't tell us what to do. And then they said, yes, we can. And then they said, no, we can't. No, you can't. And they said, yes, we can. No, we can't. Yes, we can. No, we can't. Okay, let's fight. And then it became a big Civil War. So, bummer. But anyhow, after that, I would say we went into our adolescent period. I think America is very closely getting to her old age. We aren't very old. We're a young nation, but I do believe that we are becoming prematurely aged because of the sin of our nation. But anyhow, Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 60, it says here that it is when the Israel was young when God made his covenant with them. Yes. It says, nevertheless, I will remember my covenant with thee in the days of thy youth, and I will establish unto thee an everlasting covenant. So we have this remembering of that. And so for Israel, spoken of as the days of the youth, understand that's kind of like the beginnings. Now, youth can include childhood. However, generally it does not. Okay, does that make sense? So, generally speaking, youth is a little older than childhood. However, sometimes youth can be used in a general sense to refer to everybody that's not older to everybody who's very young. So youth can be a wide span of ages. But for our purposes in the Bible, mainly we're looking at the period after childhood, when you begin to become physically older or more mature, and then along with that goes socially and emotionally and mentally and all of that. So it says the Bible, however, presents a somewhat different characterization of youth to that of modern day thinking. So youth isn't just an age, okay? It has to do with, and by the way, where those that have gone beyond the youth years, we often say things like that, right? You know, age is just a number. It doesn't matter really how old you are. It matters how old you feel and all that kind of thing. But the fact of the matter is, those of us that have gone past the youth age, and here's the thing. The world often, like if you're in your 70s, youth is 40s, all the way up to the 40s. Seriously? And so, like, well, you ask anybody in their 70s, anybody in their 70s around here. What do you consider youth to end at, Brother Wilhelm? You're not in your 70s, but 20 years old is when youth would end. Okay, that's probably more biblical. Fellas at Regent, we got a couple guys at Regent that are more mature than others in age, more advanced. We'll put it that way. I can't hear you guys though because you're on mute. So one of you will have to unmute so that you can answer the question. Oh, you probably got me muted too. I'm just kidding. Hey, Eric, unmute the thing. There you go. He's like, what? I was sleeping. Leave me alone. So, youth. When do you, brother Jim? How old is somebody? You would still consider them a youth? How old would you say? All right. 20s, okay. All right, brother CD, what would you say? $39, you say? Did you say 29 or 39? 39, okay. Okay, now I'm going to help you guys with definitions of ages and stages once again real quick here. So, you are a youth until you are an adult. Now, you may still be a young adult in comparison to older adults, but you are a youth until you're an adult. At the point you become an adult, you are no longer a youth. Now, you can still be somewhat a child while you're a youth. But once you become an adult, you're not supposed to be a child or a youth anymore. You're now an adult. So I would say, biblically speaking, 20 years old, as Brother Wilhelm said, 20 years old is adult. That's when you go from youth to adult. Now, you may still be a young adult. And I had one man tell me that as far as he's concerned, anybody that says or tries to make any major life decisions before the age of 35 is stupid. And they say you're 35 is when you're old enough to where you've got some brains and you can make good decisions. I think he said anybody, but I disagree with that. I would say that if you are brought up in the Word of God, then I would say you should be able to make godly decisions by the time you're 20 years old. You should be able to. Now, does that mean you're going to make every decision right? No. My wife and I could probably think back last 16, 17 years. I was 20, 17 years ago. Back then, I've made some dumb decisions here and there. But it's during that time that you start realizing that your decisions are dumb. You don't just, I mean, if you have any sort of biblical knowledge, if you're a Christian, you start to realize that's not wise. And I really, as a Christian, I started learning that in my teens, but it really didn't actually rubber meet the road till my 20s. And then it took I was probably 23. Really, it was the wake-up call I had when I left the reception battalion and showed up at the basic training battalion headquarters, and the drill sergeant got on the bus and started screaming at us, and we all and kids were wetting their pants and crying and stuff, and I was like, "What do you want me to do?" And they said, "Run!" They said, "Get off my bus!" And I'm like, "I didn't even know this belonged to you." And so I get off the bus, and then there's somebody standing out there and said, "Run, run!" Everybody's running in every direction, and then but then there's a drill sergeant up the hill and it's like, "Over here!" And then everybody's, "Oh," and they all run over there. And then you run down, they're like find a canteen and stand next to it, And anyhow, but I think those days were the days that I started to realize that, you know what, this is serious stuff. Now, it took like the fact that we were at war and I was being trained to go to war and maybe die and all of that. I mean, that's when they switched the name of basic training from basic training to basic combat training. And so when they started doing, it like snapped me out of it. Now, I will say that throughout my life, there have been multiple times where I'll be like not quite in reality, and then God will do something that snaps me out of reality, or not out of irreality, and snaps me into reality. And so one was when I was 19, I think, when my cousin died. No, I was 20. When my cousin died, God snapped me into reality and said, "Hey, life's not permanent; it's short, and you're going to die someday, and you need to make the right decisions." And so that's when I decided to marry her. And so so that was a good decision. Then in basic training at 23, it was like, snap out of it, man, snap out of it. And then it also reminded me at that point that the decision to go to the Army was stupid. And and I was immediately, at basic training, I was trying to research ways to get out. And I found out there's no way out, especially when you're at war. There's no way out. The only way out is die. And so I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to get through it. And Brother Kaiser said, "You know what? You signed the dotted line." I said, "Nope, I signed an electronic thing." And he said, "Same thing. You signed the thing, you're going to do it." And so it was at about 23 that I was like, okay, when I make decisions, some decisions are going to last a long time. I will have that decision with me all the way until I die because of that. Now, there's a lot of good things that have come from it. It's not all bad, but they taught me discipline. And I'll say that if it wasn't for me going to basic training, I would still be, so we left McGregor Road to come start this church when I was 28. And I would still be very, I think it's 27 and turned 28 like right after I was ordained. I would still be very, very like out of discipline if if it wasn't for basic training. If it wasn't for the military, I would be way out of discipline. And some of the things that I do now, some people say, well, not everybody's like you. I understand that. And part of the reason that I am the way that I am, as far as like go, 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 and I've always been go, 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 but as far as like go, 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 and don't quit, and all of that was instilled in me in the military training, that base combat training, because I let it be applied. It wasn't just a bunch of guys screaming at me and me thinking, just a bunch of guys screaming. No, I realized that I needed to listen to what they were saying. I needed to learn something. And what it taught me is that most of the time I limit myself more than, I think that my abilities aren't, they're more limited than they really are. And I realized that sometimes, I have not passed out. I had not passed out one time when they were, quote unquote, smoking us. They're like making us work out until steam's coming off of us and stuff. I didn't pass out once. I thought I was going to. I thought I was going to die several times, but I didn't. I didn't pass out. Didn't have any seizures or anything. Didn't have any trouble. None of that. But what I began to realize is it's time to grow up. It's time to make the right decisions. It's time to, and then if I make a wrong decision, it's time to learn from it and learn how to make the right decisions from that point forward because of that. And so the problem is in today's society, most men don't hit that point till they're in their 30s. That's wrong, and it shouldn't be that way. It ought to be in the early 20s is really the way it ought to be. In fact, it really ought to be at 20 years old. And by the way, that's why I'm not necessarily opposed to the way Israel does things. You graduate from high school, guess where you go next year? You don't go to college, you go to the military. Now, I'm not like saying that we need to do that absolutely, but I'm saying that maybe not the worst idea, because it instills discipline and it snaps you into reality, especially if you end up having to go to war, because that'll snap you into reality real quick. Anyhow, and it's different than playing video games where you're shooting people. It's different. It's different when you can smell the blood next to you. It's different when you can, when all the gore and all the stuff's right there, right? Well, go to a butcher shop sometime or go hunting. But anyhow, so biblically speaking, one is a youth here. It says in Proverbs 20 verse 29, it says the glory, very good. The glory of young men is their strength, yes, and the beauty of the old men is the gray head. Amen. I unfortunately probably won't get there. It'll more than likely just stay too short to be beautiful. And so I look at my uncle's hair all the time in envy. Beautiful silver head. No, and I'll tell you what, a white beard, and some people are like, oh man, I'm getting gray in it. I can't, got to shave it now. No. I think a white beard is distinguishing. It's good. It's a good thing. It says, hey, I'm a man, and I am an achieved man. I have achieved the white beard. If nothing else, I've achieved the white beard. But maybe I've achieved some other things too. Right, Daryl? Yours has just changed the last couple of years. It was a black beard when you first started coming here. It's probably been my preaching, been making your beard turn white. I'm just kidding. Isaiah 40 verse 30 and 31 implies endurance as a quality of youth. And boy, I will tell you, endurance is a quality of youth. I was playing basketball with my kids on Monday, and I almost died. but I didn't. And I played hard, and if it wasn't for that one free I beat them. We were playing 21. I got 22 points. And then I don't know if we were following that rule or not, where you got to prove it or whatever. I don't know. Nobody said it except for George, and he wasn't playing. So everybody else was kind of like, he won. And I was like, okay. And then George was like, you got to prove it. I was like, okay. So I went back, and I was like, let's see. All right, I'll miss it, and it'll go to Amelia. And that's exactly what happened. And so then AJ won by 1 against Amelia. But after that, we played 2-on-2. And it was me and Isaac and AJ and Amelia. And Isaac was at a great disadvantage because he had someone who was no longer in their youth playing with him on his team. And because I was no longer in my youth, the endurance was like, and so I was out there playing, and they may not have noticed, but I was like barely breathing. And well, I was breathing a lot actually, and my heart was like about to explode and all of that. But it was because I didn't have the endurance of the youth. And that's why, by the way, that's why if you happen to beat your grandpa playing basketball, it's because you can last longer than he can in it. If you were playing horse or something, he'd probably whoop you. But no, okay. So anyhow, he used to beat everybody, by the way, except him. No, he beat you too, didn't he? Back and forth. It's a good match. All right, so let's see, Isaiah 40. No, that's the next page. All right, Isaiah 40, verses 30 and 31, it says, even the youths shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord, as we often will quote, shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. Now notice it says, even the youths shall faint and be weary. In other words, he's saying this is an exception. Normally they wouldn't faint and be weary because they're youths, and they usually don't do that. But even in this case, they are going to. Oh, nice. Praise the Lord. Amen. Tornado watch. So, let me let you guys know real quick, okay? If the tornado siren goes off, okay, or if there's actually, whenever there's a tornado, so wait a minute. I keep forgetting. Watch warning. Watch warning. Watches means that there's actually one out. Warning means there might be one. Is it the other way around? I thought it was watch means decided. Okay. I've got the picture of the Mrs. Gulch and the Wicked Witch, and it says how to know the difference between watch and warning. So anyways, if it switches to whatever one means there's a tornado somewhere around, everybody needs to be on this side of the room, and the door needs to be locked. But everybody needs to be on this side of the room. If the power goes out, we just get on this side of the room. Our live stream will keep going, and we'll keep rolling. But the speakers won't be rolling, but it'll still be picking up the mic for the live stream. So we'll keep rolling. And if the roof comes off, get under a pew and hold on. So that's the main thing. So it's not likely to happen, but it could if the tornado actually hit here. But just want to make sure you guys understand how we handle safety measures. If something like that happens, go over here. If the building catches fire, does everybody know how to get out of the building? There, yes, there you go. Okay. Sorry, I got a tornado watch. Okay. So endurance is implied here, right? Endurance is implied. Now, number 3 here, physically. All right, I'm getting y'all's attention there. Number 3, physically. Under physically, it says it is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth. Now, notice there that the word yoke is Y-O-K-E, not Y-O-L-K. That's Those are different words, right? Y'all know the difference? One you eat, and one you use for labor. Y-O-L-K is like an egg yolk, or yolk, as, yeah. But a yoke is something that you put on for labor, right? So a yoke is like a harness that goes on your shoulders. Actually, a yoke isn't for people; it's actually for beasts of burden. So it's like a kind of a horseshoe thing that goes over the neck of a ox, and then it's clasped at the bottom, and then there's another one that goes over the neck of the ox next to it, and so they walk with that yoke on their neck, and you can hook up implements to that yoke. You can have the plow and whatever, and the ox walks, and you can stand back there on the plow head and to get it down in the ground, and you can take your little stick and you can control the oxen which direction to go, and go forward and go back, go forward, go left, go yaw, and I can't remember the other one, but there's like words that you say and tap them here and there to have them go what direction they need to go. But anyhow, a yoke here has to do with burden and carrying and laboring, and so this would mean that youth are supposed to be capable of hard work, and as opposed to sitting around and playing games. Youth should be capable of hard work. And so Lamentation chapter 3, verse number 27 says, "It is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth." It is good to learn to work hard in your youth. I am spoiling my children because I do insurance adjusting, and work to them is riding along and doing insurance adjusting. But on the other hand, we go to the church building, we dig and we pick things up, and we swing hammers, and we do work like that. We mow the grass and things like that. Did he mow our grass? The neighbor's grass. Okay. We need to mow our grass, and grass here, and the grass at the new building this week before Sunday, hopefully. So anyhow, no, it's canceled. All right. So physically, socially, youth is that time when one is still resident in the Father's house. Let's look at Leviticus chapter number 3 and verse 27, and chapter 22 and verse number 13. See here, it says, "But if," up there, "it is good for a man that he," no, I already read that. Verse 27, we're reading verse 13, sorry. It says, "But if the priest's daughter be a widow or divorced or have no child, and is returned unto her father's house as in her youth, she shall eat of her father's meat, but there shall no stranger eat thereof." Interesting things talked about in that passage, but the idea here is that it's pointing back to like it was when you were a youth, right? So as a youth, so here's the deal. I know in America, maybe over the last generation before that, it was not uncommon for a teenager to say, "You know what? I'm getting a job. I'm getting out of here." And they would say, get out of their parents' house, or they'd get a job and they'd feel like, now I have a job, I've got money coming in, so I don't have to do what my parents tell me to do. And that is the American way. That's not uncommon. I've heard of people say, "Well, I got a job when I was 12 years old and I moved out," and I'm like, man, 12 years old. And that's not uncommon in generations past. It's not. How many people you know, Brother Don, that worked from a young, probably your parents maybe, worked from a young age, basically took on adulthood in their teenage years?
Yeah, there was, I think Johnny started working when he was about 14.
Mm-hmm. Well, difference between just working and like moving out of the house.
He moved out too.
Oh, really? Like 14?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that's kind of common in America. That's not common in the Bible. Usually you don't.
Kentucky.
Oh, definitely common in Kentucky. Yeah, you get done with 8th grade and it's time to go to work. So, not necessarily today, but it has been in the past. But in in the Bible and biblical homes today, by the way, not just in the Bible times, but in biblical homes today, people who live according to the Bible today, Christians' homes today. In the Word of God, in the Christian home, the way it's supposed to be actually is that you are, whether youth or adult, you are in the Father's house until it's time for you to get married, generally speaking. Now, I don't say that as like a hard, fast rule that like folks who, are like 27 or whatever, they can't move out if they want to. But I would say that biblically speaking, at least for the girls or the ladies, the young ladies, as far as I'm concerned, my girls can stay in our house until they're 50 if they don't get married. But I want them to get married, and I want to have grandkids, obviously all four of them, and I want them all to have a whole bunch of kids, and we have family reunions and have thousands of kids running around everywhere, and then Grandpa will get up and say, "Everybody go home. I'm going to bed." I'm just kidding. But anyhow, but as far as biblically speaking, girls are supposed to stay in the home until they get married. That's the biblical example we find. Yes. Now, young men often can move out when they become an adult. Now, I'm not saying that to say that my boys need to move out when they become an adult. If they're wise, they will mooch off of they will stay with their parents as long as they can, so that they're set up to be. And by the way, I don't really mean that way. I mean, my boys can stay with us as long as they want to, but they will take on responsibility so that when they leave, they're already ready and already used to paying bills, and so they're able to get out and make things work, and not be like, well, I got a job, I make like $15 an hour, I'm good. You say, oh yeah, you can make it on $15 an hour. Yeah, you might be able to, but if you can stay home and you can spend some time, preparing to leave, why not do it? Wouldn't it be much nicer to move out of the house having enough money to buy a house of your own cash? Sure would, wouldn't it? It'd be a whole lot better than, well, I got to find a place, and then you got to rent an apartment for a while, and then you got to scrounge up money, and then you get a mortgage you can't afford, and then you try to make it, and all that, I mean, think about it, So anyhow, socially though, we recognize that the home scenario is within the youths are in the home. A couple other verses that deal with this in Numbers chapter 30 verses 3 and 16 says, if a woman also vow a vow unto the Lord and bind herself by the bond, being in her father's house in her youth. Now that goes on to say that the father can say nope and veto the vow. You ought to read it sometime. It's interesting. Verse number 16 says, but what's pointing out here is that she would be in her father's house as a youth. Verse number 16 says, these are the statutes which the Lord commanded Moses between a man and his wife, between the father and his daughter, being yet in her youth, in her father's house. So the idea here is that socially speaking, youths live with their parents. They have parents taking care of them. And I would say all the way up until they are no longer a youth, when they become an adult. Now you say, well, it's okay to be 47 and living in my mom's basement. No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's okay to be 47 and living in the basement of the house that you own that you let your mom have the upstairs for. That's fine if you're the one providing for your mom. But if you're living in your mom's basement playing video games and not working, something's not right with that picture. Or sleeping all day. It doesn't matter what you're doing if you're not providing as an adult man. It's not right. That's not the way it's supposed to be. I understand we got the Rona going on now and nobody can work and all that. I understand that. That's like an exception to the rule. It's not like the normal thing. But when it all clears up, we get back to it, right? And diligent people, God blesses, even in the midst of crazy stuff like this. Oh yeah, yep. I've noticed that folks who are now either already had a good setup before, or they're diligent and they've got some skills and they've made themselves valuable to other people. Other people hire them. They may not have their primary thing going, but God provides in other ways, and that's just the way it works. I've never, as David said, he said, "I have been young and now am old, and I have never seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread." And that's true. When you're right, when you do right and you are right, like before God, you're righteous and you do the right things, and then along with that, you're diligent and you show that you're a good worker, guess what? It's not hard to maintain a good scenario like that. Now, I know I talk to guys, I've done counseling for years over at the mission and things, and I've talked to guys that they're like, there just aren't any jobs out there. And I'm like, no, you're flat wrong about that. There are jobs everywhere. It's just a matter of you being humble enough to take one that you think is below you so that you can show yourself. I don't care if you go work as a delivery guy at Domino's. If you're a good worker, they're going to talk to you about being a manager. You can go, if you're a good worker, you can go anywhere and advance. Anywhere. Do anything. But where'd that come from? Oh yeah, youth and getting out of the house and all that kind of thing. So, next thing here, number 2, youth ought to be able to keep cattle. Yes. You said it. Amelia, go get them. Hey, goats are cattle too, okay? It's right there in the Bible study. Youth ought to be able to keep cattle. No, the idea is be capable of working. See, it should not be the first time that you have ever, that a young adult has ever worked when they get done with college. You should have been working from your youth. I would say that it is not uncommon for an 11-year-old to work. Say, what? You can't get a job permit or work permit. I'm not talking about working for money necessarily. I'm talking about working. When I was 11 years old, I started mowing the grass. That was my job from that point forward, and I hated it until the Lord dealt with my heart. But you could start working as young as 11. How old are you? 11! Oh man, we're getting the mower out tomorrow. Mom will watch so you don't cut any toes off. But just wear steel-toed boots. You'll be all right. Yeah, it's a push mower. Is the one we have a self-propelled? Okay. Oh yes, you can. You run over it twice. I'll teach you. So yeah, when you get tall grass, what you do, here's a free one, okay? We're talking about work. I'm gonna give you a free one. When you got tall grass, you either get cattle or you get a push mower, and as you do, or bush hog or whatever. But if you got a small yard and tall grass, like a little city yard, like what's around here, here's what you do. You know that handle that you're pushing? Push down on it and raise the mower deck up a little bit. Now, here's the danger of doing that. If there's a ball in the yard or a stick in the yard or anything that would normally just go under that thing, you're going to have that blade spinning this way instead of this way. And so anything it catches, it's going to throw, and it's going to break my siding, and you better not do that. No, anyways, but no, you go over it high first, and then you back over it low, right? And then sometimes, because it might be too high, you go over it again, right? So simple. It just means that you mow the grass 3 times, and that's okay. And that's okay. You can raise the wheels if they're adjustable. Yeah. So yeah, and sometimes if it's really high, like right now, I don't know, for whatever reason, some parts of my yard are completely bald, and other parts of my yard are like this tall. I'm just kidding, not really. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it depends on what the dog's doing in that part of the yard. So, no, it's about that tall, and you're not going to raise the wheels high enough to, you'll have to lift the deck, and you're going to have to mow it sideways, and then come back and mow it sideways a little lower, and then come back and then mow it straight. You're good. See, now you know. Take care of it tomorrow after you get done with school. All right, so as a youth, you should be capable of working. Now, I will tell you that young folks like that, you gotta teach them to learn how to work. And actually, speaking of 11-year-olds and working, Isaac did his own laundry today. Kind of. He put it in the washer. I moved it to the dryer, and then he came and got it and took it back to his room himself. Did you put it away? Man, you got to do that tonight. All right. So that's and girls, well, especially this one, you need to do that with your own too. And you back here in the back, not you, him. You need to put your clothes. You need to do your own laundry too, because by the time you guys grow up and all of that, Mama's not going to do your laundry anymore. Matter of fact, she's going to throw your dirty laundry at you and say you need to either wear this or clean it yourself. And I'm gonna make sure she does that pretty soon for some of you, because you got to do it. But as youth, you got to. And by the way, this, you may feel like, well, why is this lecture time for the youth? That's exactly what it is. It's understanding the expectations of youth. That's what this study is about, this particular letter, youth. It's understanding what should be biblically expected of youth. And by the way, when you start hearing me saying these kind of things about, to teenagers and young double-digit children, 10, 12, 20, 10, 11, 12, then you have to understand, though, and Emma's getting there. She's asleep. She's getting there. In September, she's going to have 2 digits. 2 digits mean it's time to get to work, to a certain extent. But we ought to be able to work in our youth. And by the way, if you learn that work ethic young, like early on, it becomes easier as an adult to continue that. And by the way, when you got that work ethic, I'm telling you, you got that work ethic, you go somewhere and you start working. Every job I worked after I got saved. Now, before I got saved, I wanted to party and do stupid stuff. After I got saved, every job I worked, it wasn't 2 weeks on the job, I either got promoted or got asked about promotion. And I'm not saying that to say, hey, look at me. I'm saying it's because I started to learn to put in the work ethic and show. I showed a good attitude. I worked at Arby's for a while. I worked all kinds of jobs, by the way. But I worked at Arby's for a while, and they were talking to me about doing management and stuff. And I said, well, is it going to make me miss church on Wednesday nights and Sundays? They said, yeah, probably. And I said, well, I can't do it. I'm sorry. But I'll be the best frontline guy that you got. And I was. And I left Arby's because I was trying to like pursue a career in automotive, and I had a job at a machine shop. And so I'd work the machine shop, and then I'd go to Arby's. That doesn't work out very well, because when you're taking people's order and you got grease on your hands, or not grease, but when you work on cars all day and you're tearing engines down and stuff, it doesn't come out completely. It stains your hands, and so your hands look dirty even though they're not. And you're at Arby's, and they're like, don't you make my stuff. I hope you don't touch any of my stuff, because your hands are, and I just thought, hey, it just doesn't seem to be compatible. So I gave him my month notice, and then I went on and went to more than full-time doing the machine shop thing. And anyhow, and by the way, I don't like working on cars, but it served a purpose. But when I was right toward the end of high school, I got a job as a security guard at Menards. And I was there 2 weeks, and I was the supervisor. And I wasn't even 18 yet. And somebody actually rose a stink about that, and I lost the position because I wasn't 18 yet. Because actually I was supposed to be, according to the rules, they weren't supposed to even hire me until I was 18. I was 17. But I wasn't supposed to be. Now, it wasn't like the law. It was just the rules of the contract. And they're like, so one of the other employees told the contract company. Now I think Menards has their own employees doing that. But one of the employees told the contract company, hey, if you don't let me be the supervisor, I'm going to tell Menards that you have someone under 18 working for you. And so I lost that position. But I had it 2 weeks. I don't say that to say, let me brag about me. I say that to say, when you show work ethic, sometimes actually just showing up is better than what most of the other workers are doing. And then showing up and having the right attitude, now you're way ahead. Showing up, having the right attitude, and doing your job better than is expected, now you're way ahead. The only way that you can get there as an adult is to learn to be there as a youth. And here's how you do it as a youth. Those of you watching online, you guys show your kids later, or they're probably watching it. As a youth, and they're children, but as a youth, you as you start to go from, here's where it clicks. Here's where it clicks. And kids, look up here at me. Here's where it clicks. When it goes from waiting to get the command, right? Because that's what it starts with. Mom says, clean your room. Or dad says, clean your room. Or, do your laundry, or do the dishes, or take the trash out, or whatever. When it goes from somebody telling you to do it to you noticing that it needs done and doing it, you've crossed the line there. A good line. You've crossed the line into being more mature. You've crossed the line from childhood, where you're told what to do, to youth, where you see what needs to be done and you start doing it. Because youth is preparation for adulthood. Because once you're an adult, if you can't see it needs done and get it done, then you'll never have company over because you're afraid they're going to see the dishes piled to the ceiling. Or you'll never have company over because you're afraid that they're going to smell your laundry from the back room, or they're going to see your the pizza boxes all over everything and all that, right? Or you're going to be hard pressed to maintain a relationship when you get married, because you're going to have, I saw this one thing online. It said, we have this magic table at my house. And it was the husband saying, he said, we got this magic table at the house. He said, no matter what I put on it, it goes where it's supposed to go. He said, I just put anything. He said, I could put the laundry on there, and it gets cleaned, and it gets folded, and it gets put away. He said, I just put it on that table. He said, I put my keys there, they end up where they're supposed to be. I'm like, where are my keys? Oh, they're where they're supposed to be. Oh, man. He said, I put my shoes on there. There you go. I can leave a half full box of pizza on the table. He says the pizza gets, put up and properly put away in the refrigerator. He's like, it's a magic table. And then his wife read it, and then his funeral. Anyhow, no. So obviously he didn't learn that things don't all go on the living room table. You have to learn everything has a place, and everything needs to be in its place, right? You learn that things are supposed to be taken care of as they need to be taken care of, not as you're told they need to be taken care of. Makes sense. And by the way, when it comes to, and I've been self-employed, and I have employed people for things for many years, and I've managed volunteers and things like that. As a manager or an employer or anything of that realm, you don't want. Now, I understand that some managers do not want employees that have initiative. Okay, they just want you to do what you're told when you're told, and that's it. But That's usually the exception. The rule usually is when you have a job, they expect you to be looking for what needs to be done and do your job the best you can. And there are some things that you need to ask if you can do it before you do it. But, if you see it needs to be done and you know how to do it, right? And this is how you, as a youth, prepare to succeed as an adult. And if you're an adult and you're not doing that, is how you go back and you learn the things you should have learned as a youth, right? And I'm just saying this because there are some aspects of that I had to learn later on that like clicked for me later on. Oh, that's okay. Now, if I just do this instead of that, it's noticeable, right? And at the same time, you have to. There's this social aspect as well that you got to be careful that you're not overstepping, your particular realm of responsibility. Because if you're at work and you try to take your boss's job, they don't usually take that very well. So you have to be balanced about it. You make sure that your responsibility is to make it look like your boss is the best at the job than anybody else, right? And so if you do that, what your boss want to do? Promote you, give you a raise, whatever, because you're making them look good. So anyhow, same thing at home. When the parents no longer have to ask the children to do things, the children start getting rewarded for things because they didn't even have to be asked to get things done, right? They just do them. Let's see here. We didn't read the other verse, did we? We didn't read either verse. So Genesis chapter 46, verse 13 says, that ye shall say, thy servant's trade hath been about cattle from our youth, even until now. In other words, they worked all the way, since they were a child. They learned to tend to a work. Both we and also our fathers, that ye may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination of the Egyptians. Now, Zechariah chapter 13, verse 5 says, but he shall say, I am no prophet, I am an husbandman, for man taught me to keep cattle from my youth. In other words, he's saying, look, I'm a worker. I've learned that from my youth. But in this particular circumstance, he ended up being a prophet too. So, number 3, youth is meant to be a time of virginity or chastity, purity. Ezekiel chapter 23, verse 3 says they committed whoredoms in Egypt. They committed whoredoms in their youth. This is not normal. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. And the rest there deals with all of the messed up stuff that they were doing. Verse number 8, speaking of this is just giving us examples of how folks were doing things that they shouldn't have been doing in the youth. And by the way, there's an aspect of that is supposed to be obviously, like all of that's supposed to be waited upon until adulthood, and then in adulthood those things are with, as the next one says here, this is a time of life when a man will be led to the wife of his youth. Isn't that interesting? The wife of your youth, which would somewhat indicate that marriage takes place, I would say, at the end of the youth years, and more than likely at that point is when adulthood starts. Now, I remember that it used to be that you would change the way you address a man based upon whether he's married or not married, right? You would address him by first name until he's married. Then he's Mr. and his last name, or in church, brother and his last name, right? And so, or once they go from childhood to adulthood, brother, and then last name. That's the way it used to be. These days, everybody calls each other by their first name and disrespects each other about all these different things and stuff. And for ladies, and it's still this way in the South a lot, actually, the right way. It'll be brother so-and-so by the last name. If they're an adult, if they're a child, it would still be brother. If they're saved, it'd be like brother and then their first name. And that's why, by the way, we go with all the Aarons that are here. We have Pastor, and we have Brother Adams, not Brother Aaron, because he's a married adult, and he's Brother Aaron until he becomes an adult, and then he'll be Brother Campbell, and I'll be Pastor Campbell. So, or just Pastor, whatever. So the names, and I still say Brother Rob, but I try to use Brother Wilhelm as much as I can. Not just because we have two Robs, but trying to use the last names, right? And now, when you have multiple people in the same area with the same last name, then you get creative and you use first names and stuff. But I usually don't. Now, in my family, we were brought up. What was it? If I called him by his first name, I was in big trouble. Right? You awake over there? If I called you by your first name, I was in big trouble. Right? Right? I had to call you by your title and your first name. Right? That was every. In fact, I think your kids still do that. They make their kids use the titles. Yep. Yeah. You call one of my aunts or uncles by their first name without saying aunt or uncle before their first name. You are in trouble. You are in trouble. I sent her a text one time. I mean, really, it was like 3 years ago. 3 years ago. Okay, I'm 35 years old, 34 years old. I sent her a text, and I was doing the voice text, but it took out the word aunt and just said Jackie. And she was like, "You mean Aunt Jackie?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's what I said. It was a voice text. It didn't. I'm sorry, And it's that respect just showing, in a family, I've got 4 aunts or 5 aunts and 4 uncles or something like that, or 4 uncles. It's 4 and 4, I think, right?
4 and 5.
4. Right, but my dad's one of them, so it would be 4 and 4 then. So 4 aunts and 4 uncles, and so anyhow, and so you got large family. It's aunt this, uncle that, right? And then it was that way with my mom too. My mom's side of the family too. It was always Aunt Debbie, Aunt Bertie, Uncle Greg, Uncle. So it's always aunt and uncle. You say that, and it felt like if you were saying your aunt or your uncle's first name without their title, it was like you have like cursed, and you're like, but you got to cover your mouth. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that, But there's that level of respect, recognizing and then as an adult, even though now we have to. You chugging that stuff, man? Just take the whole urn over there. I'm just kidding. As an adult, we yep, I'm almost done with my water too. As an adult, though, we've still try to maintain that, right? And what I was saying is in the South, and some Southern style churches here in the North, I think at Liberty, the way that it was always Miss so and so and Brother so and so last name, right? Is always that way. I mean, it's like, and they would correct the kids. You don't call them by the first names. It's Miss so and so. And sometimes if there's a bunch of the like for the Campbells, there's like 1 million of us. Actually, there's millions of us, and so you say you would use the first name or some way to do it, but you would always use the title with it. Like in church, it's always brother this, brother that. And of course, if somebody's not saved, you can use Mister, right? In the military, they use those things, right? Always officers, yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. Other ranking folks like non-commissioned officers, yes sergeant, no sergeant. It's using titles, using respect, using those things, and that I believe that, and that's, by the way, that's kind of the crossover really is from youth to adulthood. And scripturally speaking, you have let thy fountain be blessed and rejoice with the wife of thy youth. In other words, you have there's two things about that wife of thy youth, and that's one. It somewhat indicates that you're in the youth ages, but at the end of the youth ages, right? The other side that is pointed out by that is that it is generally expected, biblically speaking, that that folks get married younger, generally speaking. Now, I know in today's society, it's normal to wait until you're 30. Sometimes, I know some. In fact, I know a fellow that said to his son, "If you talk to me about engagement or marriage before," now this is a lost family, engagement or marriage before you are 30 years old, I will disown you. And the guy had a lot of money, and so he could say that. And guess what? His kids did. They didn't get married till they were in their 30s. But I think biblically speaking, young marriages are good as long as your youth was spent properly training for your adulthood. If you weren't training for your adulthood and you lived your youth playing games as a child all the way through your youth, when you become an adult, now you need to learn to be an adult before you can be married. See, the expectation is that the youth becomes an adult, or the youth is mature enough to get married by the time they get to the end of their youth. You say, man, that's kind of, I'm not talking about youths getting married at like 14, 15, 16 years old. I'm talking about youth as in like 19, 20. Okay? That's still, I believe, youth. I would say the time that the reason that we have the age of whatever, 21 as certain things, like, and not just alcohol, but like in Indiana, you can't buy bullets, like ammunition, until you're 21. You can't buy a firearm. You can't buy certain firearms until you're 21, but you can have a carry permit at 18. But is that the federal law? I think that's the federal, and then the Indiana law for carrying is 18. So the two are different. They recognize, Indiana says 18, you're an adult. Federal government says 21. In that sense, from that perspective. And I think the underlying reason for that actually is somewhat biblical. And that is that you're a youth until you're 20, and your 20th year is usually the year of, and I don't just say that because I got married when I was 20, but your 20th year is usually the year to grow up. In other words, you're now, you're at 20, you're a youth, but you're almost an adult. It's like that magical number. I'm a day older, and now I'm 21, so now I'm an adult. Now, that doesn't mean that you should go do something irresponsible like drink alcohol. It means that you should do something responsible. I'm an adult now, right? And so the wife of your youth, generally speaking, would be like 20 years old, roughly, somewhere around that, maybe 18 to 20, probably closer 19 to 20. And then, or it could be older, that's fine. But that's kind of the general thought process, is the time frame. By the way, the reason for that is so that you can have a lot of children. That's the idea. Not to say that everybody is supposed to have a lot of children. But if you're going to, the best times for that is your 20s, usually. Now, how old? Let's see. She's 9. Yeah, we had all our kids within 5 years, 6 years, 5.5 years. Yeah. What's that? Yeah. But she was young and able to bounce back, right? And so now that's not to say that you shouldn't have children into your 30s. That's fine too. But physically speaking, that's kind of that time frame. So Malachi 2 verses 14 and 15 there. You can look at that at your leisure. I think some of you probably already read it, so we'll go on. Real quick, because we're way over time, but I want to finish this section. Emotionally, who feared to draw? Who? Jether feared to draw his sword. In Judges 8:20 it says, and he said unto Jether his firstborn, up and slay them. But the youth drew not his sword, for he feared, because he was yet a youth. This was his first big test of courage. From the somewhat emotional standpoint, it's usually not youth that will be at war, but it is at the end of the youth ages. Just like when we talk about marriage and stuff, it's like what happens, and I think somebody told my son, every year now that he's 15 years old, every year is huge. So much, and he's back there thinking, why are you putting so much on my shoulders? Every year, though, and it's a fact, every year from the point that you become a youth and you're starting to transition, like at 15, you're starting to transition from youth to adult. Now, that transition takes all the way till you're about 20, 21. But you're starting to make somewhat adult decisions every year from the point, where'd everybody else go? I'm talking about over at Regent. Engen's here and everybody else ran away. Tell him to get back in there. Anyways, every year, 15, they're like, we're not youth, we don't have to be in here. Nah, you can learn from this. He left too. Every year from 15 on, every year, something big, right? At 15, you get your permit. 16, you get your license. 17, I forget. Other major stuff, right? You're stressing over 18. Graduating, and 18, you're usually finishing school. 19, sometimes you're picking a career direction. Now that doesn't mean that everybody's got to have it all figured out by then, but you should be ready for whatever it's going to be, even if you don't know what it's going to be. You should have the work ethic down. You should have the ability to take up anything at that point and go ahead and do it. And again, as I said, I didn't know, other than I knew I was called to preach when I was 15, I didn't know what career path I was going to take. In fact, the insurance adjusting, I've kind of settled in real well, and I think I'm going to probably just keep doing that until I'm just full-time pastor. But I didn't know that. I started insurance adjusting at, 31? Well, it was about 30, 31. And so I didn't know that this was going to be what I was going to do. I hadn't thought in high school, well, I think I'll be an insurance adjuster. I think I'll do this or do that. In fact, my career day, where I was supposed to go and follow somebody, my planned job or whatever, I went to church and hung out with my pastor and watched the stuff that he did. And so I think we paid missionaries that day. So it was putting the check and the letter and the in the envelope, and sealing the envelope and putting the sticker on it and addressing it and whatever. Actually, I think we digitally addressed it, but anyhow, it was sending money to missionaries, and so that was like my career day. And so, as far as my career, my planned career, so to speak, it was pastoring. But understand that God often has you do different things. And yes, there are some people who are like, that's what I'm going to be. And God wants them to be that, and they go and do it, and they're successful with it. But more important than what you're going to be successful with physically, we better wrap it up. We're going to get the power shut off. More important than what you're going to be physically. Did we lose? We lost Region, I think, didn't we? Yep. I think their power went out. More important than what we're going to be from the perspective of, check the alarm thing. I think the wind blew the bank door open. So, just make sure the alarm's not going off, that's all. So, more important than what you're going to do for a living is what you're going to do related to your life in heaven. So more important than your job is your responsibility in the ministry. A lot of wind, amen, amen. If we hear the sirens go off, come over here. All right, so anyhow, 1 Samuel 17, verses 33 and 42. Who says both? Saul and Goliath. Why don't y'all move over here? Just grab all your stuff and move over here. Yep. In case that wall goes away. There's a whole other room over there. So this is the inside of the building. So we got wind blowing out there. That door's gonna fly off the hinges, man. Wind's blowing pretty good out there. It's blowing good out there, not bad. You make everybody scared. Come on. It's blowing real good out there. Amen. Brother Wilhelm, did your power shut off? Oh, okay. You just turn off the lights. Okay. All right. So, real quick here. We're not going to read the passage. It's there. Next. It's there. Okay. Saul and Goliath discounted David's ability and courage to fight. And verses 34 through 37 explain why David was not afraid. Remember, David was a youth. You all know the story. David was a youth. He came up to fight Goliath, right? And he said, yeah, that is blowing pretty good. All right. Is it? That's a good sign. Man, that's some good stuff out there, isn't it? Amen. All right. If the power goes out, we're going to keep on plugging away. We'll be done. So. Yes. Good adjusting work. Right. Good adjusting weather out there. Not weather to do adjusting, weather to get some adjusting work. Yeah. Don't go over there. All right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If you need to see, just come up here in front of brother Darrell right there. Okay. So. Or Brother Sims, sorry. So, yeah, my dogs are back at home. I'm sure they're screaming. They're back here howling and screaming and stuff. Mentally, we're going to get this done, all right? I mean, we're not going to get this done mentally. Mentally is the next point. Amen. Understanding is a wellspring of life. Proverbs 16:22. That's what it says. Understanding is a wellspring of life unto them that hath it. But the instruction of fools is folly. So understanding by the way, this is why young people say like high school age. Usually your high school age is the time that you're getting all that stuff you need as far as like you're getting you've laid the foundation with your elementary school and so on. High school is when you're getting the practical stuff, and a lot of kids are like, well, why is it that we have to do this and we have to do that in high school? When I was in high school, I made sure to get a lot of stuff. I did shop class, metals and woods and all that kind of stuff. For my junior and senior year, I did automotive, and so I was making sure that I was learning general mechanical things and things that you do with your hands and stuff, so that as an adult, a lot of the adult things that men really should know how to do, stuff around the house, so I learned how to weld and how to do forge work and sheet metal stuff, and that's all cool stuff. Learn to duck and cover. Anyhow, Understanding, that's important. Those are things, that's the stuff that you need to do as a youth so that when you're an adult, yeah, you're on an outside wall back here. Sorry, if the wall starts to come down, just jump through the window, you'll be all right. This window, not that window. Okay, so understanding. We got to get through these last 2 points. According to Proverbs 7:7, a youth may be void of understanding, but this is not normal. Okay, it says, and beheld among the simple ones, I discerned among the youths a young man void of understanding. Now, he's saying these are among the simple ones. These are among, this is a youth that's void of understanding. There are some times there are youth, and really in our world today, it's most of the time youth are void of understanding. But this isn't normal. This isn't what God intends. God intends for youth to be understanding. They should start to understand how the world works. They should start to understand how things work, right? And that doesn't mean that they need to sit around all day and watch the show How Things Work. Okay? It means that they just need to understand somewhat how things, how things work, how a tornado works and what the signs and things are and all of that, right? Of concern and everything. So, and by the way, there's only 2 feet between here and the roof, so you can hear it blowing across the flat roof up there. And it might be the flat roof blowing off, but we'll be all right. There's a metal roof underneath the rubber roof, and then underneath the metal roof is steel girders all over the place that are very strong. I've looked in this, so, but anyhow, I'm not saying that it's like impenetrable, but I think we're all right. If we're not, then we get to go to heaven early. Amen. So, number 3, last point. In 1 Kings chapter 20, verses 6 through 11, which we're not going to read again. You can read it on your own. We would read it if we didn't spend so much time talking about other things that were important on the subject. It says, though, that what King who? Rehoboam disastrously rejected the counsel of the old men for that of his young men, his young friends. And so that was the issue, right? The whole kingdom was divided over that fact that he rejected the counsel of old men. Actually, what was it yesterday? Brother Ronnie was like, he said something about the fact that I asked his advice on something, what he thought about something. And I said, I sent that text out to a bunch of people. I said, hey, this is a matter of possibility and opportunity. I want to know what you think. That's the siren. So stay on this side. And we're actually going to have church a little longer tonight because it's safe to do that. We're going to finish church, but we're going to hang out in fellowship because if you go outside, it might not be safe. So, and by the way, if we would have left 15 minutes ago, you probably would have been in it. So, praise God for long church services. We're going to be done. Sorry, sister. I know you got kids at home and stuff. Yeah. And Travis is hunkering down with them, I'm sure. He's a good dad. He's going to take care of them. So, we have to be careful of making sure that we have wise counsel. There's safety in a multitude of counselors. And so, I try not to make decisions without trying to include other people so that I can get some idea. Now, it doesn't mean I always take the advice of other people. It just means that I'm going to consider it. It's good to think about. And sometimes, actually, there are things that I could make the decision for, and it would just happen and it'd be fine. But I ask other people, and they give me advice. They say, okay, do this or do that, or I don't think that's a good idea because of this or this. And even though I may disagree with their advice, sometimes I'll decide to follow their advice because I respect their opinion, And it's not always best, and I learned this from a youth, it's not always best for me to have my way. Sometimes me getting my way messes things up, And so it's good to make sure that I have counsel, good godly counsel from people who are maybe more experienced than me. So, Linda, you're in the basement, aren't you? You're in the perfect, yeah. We're in a cinder block room. Amen. Well, any questions or thoughts on what we just talked about?